You're thinking about her right now, even if you pretend you're not. You replay the last conversation, the short replies, the silence that feels louder than rejection. You wonder what you did wrong, or worse, if you ever mattered at all. Here's the painful truth most men never hear. Trying harder is exactly what makes her forget you faster. Not because you're not good enough, but because attraction doesn't work the way you were taught. Right now, you're chasing clarity. She's chasing a feeling. And the moment a woman feels like she has you emotionally figured out, the mystery dies. The tension disappears. And so do you from her mind. This video is not about tricks. It's not about manipulation. And it's definitely not about begging for attention. It's about something far more powerful. How to make a woman miss you so deeply that she thinks about you when you're not there, feels your absence in quiet moments, and wonders why she suddenly cares. Even if right now she says she's not interested. Because missing someone is not caused by presence. It's caused by contrast. And most men never create it. They over-explain, they over-text, they over-give, and they erase the very space where desire grows. If you've ever felt invisible to a woman you cared about, if you've ever been nice, supportive, and available yet still overlooked, this is for you. Stay with me. Because by the end of this, you'll understand something that quietly changes how women feel around you. Not forcefully, not desperately, naturally. To understand how to make a woman miss you, you first have to understand why people miss anyone at all. It's not because someone was nice. It's not because they were available, and it's not because they tried their hardest. People miss what changes their internal state. A woman doesn't miss a man because he was always there. She misses him because when he was there, she felt something different about herself. Calmer, more alive, more grounded, more feminine, more seen, without being chased. Here's the central idea most men never hear. Women don't miss their presence. They miss emotional impact. And emotional impact only forms when three things exist at the same time: safety, tension, and space. Most men destroy one or all three. They become emotionally loud. They try to prove value. They rush connection before it has time to breathe. But the male presence that creates longing is quiet, centered, self-contained. This is not about disappearing to trigger anxiety. That's manipulation, and it never lasts. This is about becoming the kind of man whose absence is felt because his presence was grounded, steady, and rare. A man who doesn't chase attention, a man who doesn't explain himself endlessly, a man whose emotions don't spill everywhere. Psychologically, the brain bonds strongest not through intensity, but through contrast. Highs only matter when there's space between them. Connection only deepens when it isn't forced. When a woman senses that a man has a full inner world, a life, standards, direction, emotional control, something shifts. She leans in, even if she wasn't interested at first. Because attraction often begins after the interaction, not during it. It begins when she's alone, when the noise fades, when she realizes she felt something around you that she doesn't feel around most men. And that's when missing starts. In the next part, I'll break down exactly how this works in real life, through principles, stories, and behaviors that don't beg for desire. They invite it. Here's the first truth that changes everything. The harder you try to be remembered, the faster you're forgotten. Most men believe attraction is built by effort. More texts, more compliments, more availability. Psychologically, this backfires. The human mind values what feels self-directed, not what feels offered too easily. When attention is constant, the brain stops registering it as meaningful. It becomes background noise. A man who tries to stay on her mind is communicating one thing beneath the surface. I need you to feel something so I can feel okay. Women don't miss the need. They feel burdened by it. I once coached a man who texted a woman every morning and every night. He thought consistency showed interest. What actually happened was silence, slow replies, then distance. When he stopped trying to be memorable and started being centered, shorter conversations, calmer tone, no emotional explanations, something changed. She reached out. not because he vanished, but because the emotional pressure disappeared. Here's the transformation most men don't expect. When you stop pushing your presence gains weight. You begin to feel different to her, less predictable. Less emotionally loud, more grounded. She starts replaying moments instead of deleting them. She remembers how she felt around you, not what you said. And here's the deeper shift. You stop performing. You stop managing outcomes. You stop needing her reaction to validate you. That inner stillness is felt instantly. And when you leave a conversation without emotional residue, no chasing, no over-explaining, you leave space behind. That space is where missing begins. Not because you asked for it, but because you finally stopped trying to earn it. Here's the bold truth most men overlook. A woman misses the man who made her feel emotionally safe without feeling emotionally owned. Safety is not softness, it's steadiness. Psychologically, the female nervous system is highly responsive to emotional regulation. When a man reacts quickly, explains himself, or tries to fix every emotional moment, her body reads that as instability, even if his intentions are good. I once saw this clearly with a man who panicked the moment a woman pulled back. He sent long messages, clarified his intentions, tried to save the connection. From his perspective, he was being honest. From hers, he felt overwhelmed. When he learned to pause, to let silence exist, to feel discomfort without reacting, the dynamic shifted. She didn't feel chased. She felt room to breathe. And breathing is where missing begins. Here's what changes when you develop emotional control. Your reactions slow down, your words carry weight, your presence feels grounded, not consuming. A woman starts to associate you with calm, with clarity, with a sense of being understood without being pressured. That's powerful. Because when she's away from you, her nervous system remembers that calm, and the contrast hits her. She notices how chaotic other interactions feel, how noisy other men are, how rare your emotional steadiness was. You didn't convince her to miss you. You didn't ask for reassurance. You didn't demand closeness. You simply remained centered. And when a woman meets a man who can hold his emotions without leaking them everywhere, his absence feels different. It feels noticeable. It feels grounding. It feels missed. Here's the statement that separates boys from grounded men. Mystery is not what you hide. It's what you don't need to explain. Most men overshare because they think clarity builds connection. In reality, emotional self-containment builds curiosity. Psychologically, the mind leans toward what it can't fully predict. When everything about you is immediately available, your feelings, your intentions, your insecurities, there's nothing left for her to explore internally. I worked with a man who explained his interest in detail after 2 dates. He thought transparency showed maturity. What it actually did was collapse tension. There was no wondering, no curiosity, no inner dialogue for her. When he learned to share less, but with intention, to let moments land without commentary, the energy changed. She began asking questions. She leaned in. Here's the transformation that happens when you stop over-explaining. Your words become deliberate. Your silence becomes expressive. Your presence feels complete without performance. You're no longer trying to be understood. You trust that who you are is felt, and that trust is magnetic. When you leave a conversation without emotional spillage, no long justifications, no future promises, she fills in the gaps herself. And what she creates in her mind feels more powerful than anything you could have said. That's how missing begins. Not from information, but from imagination. A man who is comfortable with being partially unknown creates a depth that lingers. Not because he's distant, but because he's whole. This is a principle most men never consciously practice. A woman misses the man who changes how she feels, without trying to change her mind. Attraction is not logical. It's an emotional memory. The female mind doesn't replay facts. It replays states. How she felt around you matters more than what happened. I once observed 2 men interact with the same woman. One tried to impress her, stories, achievements, opinions. The other listened, responded slowly, and stayed present. Guess which one she thought about later? The second man didn't dominate the space. He regulated it. Psychologically, when a man can hold space without agenda, a woman's nervous system relaxes, and relaxation creates emotional imprinting. Here's what changes when you focus on her emotional state instead of her approval. You stop chasing reactions. You stop pushing conversation. You become selective with your words. Your presence feels intentional. You leave interactions at the right moment, not because you're playing games, but because you respect emotional saturation. When a conversation ends before it drains, it echoes. She remembers the calm, the ease, the subtle lift she felt after talking to you. And when you're gone, that uplift contrasts with the rest of her day. That contrast creates longing, not because you did something dramatic, but because you were different. A man who leaves emotional residue without emotional demand is rare, and rarity is remembered. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Distance does nothing if your presence was empty. Many men here pull back and think disappearance creates desire. It doesn't. Psychologically, the mind only feels absence when something meaningful was there to begin with. If your presence was needy, reactive, or approval-seeking, your absence feels like relief. But if your presence was grounded, calm, and self-directed, your absence feels noticeable. I once worked with a man who went silent after being ignored. He believed space would make her realize nothing happened. Why? Because when he was present, he was emotionally noisy, always checking, always adjusting himself to her mood. When he learned to show up differently, less validation seeking, more centered, less available emotionally, something shifted. Now, when he left, there was contrast. Here's what changes when your presence has weight. You're not trying to hold her attention. You're giving it direction. Your words are slower. Your energy is calmer. You don't stay longer than necessary. When you step away, she doesn't feel abandoned. She feels the loss of a stable emotional experience. That's when she starts thinking. That's when missing begins. Absence is not a tactic, it's a natural result of self-respect. And when a woman senses that your life continues with or without her attention, your time becomes valuable. Not because you withheld it, but because you owned it. This is where most men lose her emotionally without realizing it. The moment you seek validation, polarity collapses. Validation seeking sounds subtle. It hides in questions, in tone, in timing. Did I say something wrong? Are we okay? I just want to know where I stand. Psychologically, these moments flip the emotional roles. Instead of being grounded, you're asking her to stabilize you. And when polarity disappears, attraction fades. I once worked with a man who constantly checked emotional temperature. He wasn't insecure. He was just afraid of losing connection. But from her perspective, he felt uncertain. And uncertainty in a man does not create longing. When he stopped seeking reassurance and started trusting his presence, everything changed. He didn't become cold. He became solid. Here's the transformation that happens when you stop chasing validation. You speak without fishing for reaction. You act without needing confirmation. You allow silence without filling it. Your energy becomes directional instead of reactive. A woman begins to feel you as a reference point, someone stable, someone grounded. And here's the key shift. She starts leaning toward you emotionally, not because you asked her to, but because polarity naturally pulls her there. When you leave a conversation without checking if she liked it, without asking where you stand, without trying to secure the bond, she feels the space. And in that space, she starts to feel something unfamiliar. Curiosity, attraction, missing, not because you withdrew, but because you finally stopped asking to be chosen. Here is a principle that quietly separates men who are felt from men who are forgotten. The man who sets the emotional pace is the man who is remembered. Most men mirror a woman's energy. If she texts fast, they text faster. If she pulls back, they panic. If she's emotional, they become emotional too. Psychologically, mirroring feels safe, but it creates sameness. And sameness kills polarity. Attraction grows when one person provides emotional direction, not control, direction. I coached a man who adjusted himself constantly to a woman's moods. When she was excited, he overengaged. When she was distant, he chased. His emotional center lived outside himself. She lost interest. When he learned to maintain his own rhythm, responding when calm, ending conversations intentionally, not rushing emotional moments, something shifted. She slowed down. Here's what changes when you lead the emotional pace. You stop reacting. You start choosing. Your energy remains steady regardless of her fluctuations. You don't punish distance. You don't reward inconsistency. Your presence becomes grounding. A woman feels this deeply. Her nervous system relaxes around a man who doesn't swing emotionally. And when you're not there, she notices the difference. She notices how other interactions feel rushed, or emotionally chaotic, or draining. And she remembers you as the man who didn't rush her, didn't push her, didn't follow her emotional weather. You stayed centered. That's when missing becomes inevitable. Because emotional leadership creates contrast, and contrast creates memory. This is where attraction quietly flips. People miss what they invested in, not what was handed to them. Most men give emotional investment too early. They open up deeply. They prioritize quickly. They attach before she has. Psychologically, the mind protects what it builds. Effort creates attachment. Investment creates value. I once coached a man who emotionally committed before the woman did. He shared his plans, his feelings, his intentions. She didn't feel closer. She felt pressured. When he learned to slow his emotional investment, to let her ask questions, to let her initiate deeper conversations, the dynamic reversed. She leaned in. Here's what changes when you allow her to invest first. You don't rush emotional depth. You respond, not unload. You reveal in layers, not floods. Your presence feels earned. A woman starts to associate you with effort on her part. She thinks about you because she's emotionally involved in the process. And when you're not there, she feels the absence of something she helped create. That's powerful. You didn't force attachment. You allowed it to grow naturally. And naturally grown attachment is what lingers. This is the quiet truth that changes everything. A woman misses the man who doesn't need her to feel whole. Neediness is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides behind politeness, sometimes behind loyalty, sometimes behind patience. But psychologically, when a man's emotional center depends on a woman's attention, she feels it instantly, not consciously, but in her body. I worked with a man whose mood rose and fell based on one woman's replies. If she texted, he felt alive. If she didn't, he felt empty. She sensed it, and what she sensed was pressure. When he rebuilt his life, his routines, his goals, his friendships, without waiting for her validation, something changed. His energy shifted. Here's what transforms when you become emotionally complete. You enjoy her presence, but you don't cling to it. You appreciate her attention, but you don't chase it. You stay grounded whether she's close or distant. That independence creates safety and attraction. A woman begins to feel that being with you is a choice, not a responsibility. And when you're gone, she doesn't feel relieved. She feels the absence of a man who was full within himself. That's when missing stops being forced and starts being natural, because completeness is rare and rarity is remembered. This is where most men fail silently. They pull back with bitterness instead of clarity. And a woman always feels the difference. Psychologically, resentment carries emotional noise. Even in silence, it leaks. When a man withdraws because he's hurt, ignored, or trying to provoke a reaction, his absence feels tense, heavy, unsettling. But when a man steps back because he chooses to, because he respects his time, energy, and direction, his absence feels clean. I once guided a man who stopped reaching out, but internally he was angry. He replayed conversations, waited for her to notice. She didn't miss him. She felt distance, but not longing. When he learned to step back without emotional charge, no silent protest, no mental arguments, no expectation, the shift was dramatic. Here's what changes when you step back from clarity, not pain. Your energy stays calm. Your silence feels grounded. There's no emotional hook attached. A woman senses that you didn't leave to punish her. You left because your life continued. That creates curiosity. Because when a man doesn't linger emotionally after stepping away, his absence feels unresolved in a powerful way. Not dramatic, not manipulative, just solid. And solidity is felt long after you're gone. Here's a truth that requires maturity to accept. If you did your part correctly, time becomes your ally, not your enemy. Most men try to rush emotional outcomes. They want clarity now, connection now, validation now. Psychologically, pressure collapses attraction. Time, when paired with grounded presence, deepens it. I once coached a man who felt anxious when nothing progressed quickly. He thought attraction needed constant momentum. So he pushed conversations forward, defined things early, sought reassurance, and each time the woman pulled away. When he learned to relax into time, to let weeks unfold without emotional forcing, something surprising happened. The women he interacted with began thinking about him between interactions because time allowed emotional processing. Here's what changes when you trust time. You stop trying to control perception. You allow feelings to mature naturally. You let silence and space work for you. A woman begins to connect dots on her own. She replays moments. She notices emotional differences. And when enough time passes without pressure, what feels neutral can turn into curiosity. What felt uncertain can turn into longing. You didn't push her to miss you. You gave her the room to discover it herself. And discovery is always more powerful than persuasion. Time doesn't weaken attraction when presence has depth. It strengthens it. At this point, something important should feel different inside you. Not excited, not anxious, calmer. Because the truth is no longer about making a woman miss you. It's about becoming a man whose absence naturally has weight. When you stop chasing emotional reactions, you start developing emotional gravity. You move differently. You speak less, but with intention. You listen without trying to fix or impress. And slowly, your life begins to change beyond dating. You become harder to shake emotionally. Rejection doesn't destabilize you. Silence doesn't trigger you. Distance doesn't make you doubt your worth. This is where strength is built. You realize that attraction was never about tactics. It was about self-possession. A man who owns his inner world doesn't negotiate for attention. He doesn't overextend for validation. He doesn't abandon himself to be chosen. Instead, he becomes selective. He gives his time where it's felt. He invests where there is reciprocity. He steps back without resentment. And something profound happens here. Women start responding differently, not just one woman, multiple women, because emotional maturity is rare, and rarity creates value. You begin to notice how often you used to abandon your center, how often you tried to secure outcomes, how often you mistook effort for strength. Now you don't. You let interactions breathe. You let curiosity grow. You let people meet you where you are. And when a woman pulls away, you don't chase. You don't harden either. You remain open, but grounded. That balance is powerful. Because whether she comes back or not, you've already won something deeper. You've built a nervous system that can handle uncertainty. You've built self-respect that doesn't fluctuate. You've built a presence that doesn't need permission. And from this place, being missed is no longer the goal. It's simply the result. Here's the truth that stays with you long after this ends. A woman doesn't miss a man because he tried to be unforgettable. She misses him because he was unmoved by the need to be remembered. Because while most men are busy proving, explaining, and chasing, a grounded man is building something quieter, a life, a center, a sense of self that doesn't bend for attention. And when you live from that place, something subtle happens. Your presence becomes rare. Your words become deliberate. Your absence becomes noticeable, not dramatic, not manipulative, just real. You no longer leave conversations wondering how you were perceived. You leave knowing who you are, and that certainty is felt. When a woman thinks back, she doesn't remember what you promised. She remembers how calm she felt, how unpressured she felt, how different it felt to be around a man who didn't need anything from her. That's when missing begins. Not loudly, quietly, in moments of stillness. In contrast, in comparison. And here's the final shift. Whether she reaches out or not stops defining you. You don't become colder. You become clearer. You don't withdraw from connection. You withdraw from self-abandonment. And from that clarity, everything changes. You stop chasing interest and start attracting alignment. You stop asking to be chosen and start choosing yourself. And when you do, being missed is no longer something you try to create. It's simply what happens when a man stands firmly in who he is and allows the world to respond. Sit with that. Let it settle. Because this isn't a technique. It's a way of being, and once you embody it, you don't just change how women feel about you, you change how you feel about yourself.